Okay. Very good. Off you go. Sorry, and welcome to the latest SAC executive panel. And this panel is titled, "What are businesses overlooking in terms of fundamentals?" So in today's panel, I'm joined by a number of my colleagues from the Supply Chain Special Interest Group for the Advancement of Consulting to discuss the issue of how and why so many businesses are overlooking the fundamentals of business as they emerge from a period of turbulence characterized by pandemic, war, and supply chain realignments into an uncertain future. So joining me today, we have Antonio Zrilic, who is the president of Logico Supply Chain Consultants in Zagreb, Croatia. Welcome, Antonio.
Hi, glad to be here.
Elizabeth Warren, President and CEO of Dialed In Partners in the Los Angeles metro area in the US. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Patrick. Good to be here.
And Lisa Anderson, also in LA metro area from LMA Consulting, President of LMA Consulting. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, now in 2023, we have a situation where businesses are emerging from a period of tumult since about 2020, when we've had a pandemic, we've had war in Europe with Russia and Ukraine, we've the threat of war over Taiwan in Asia, we've ongoing supply chain realignments around the world, we've inflation, skills shortages, and the list goes on and on. So as we head into this uncertain future, it seems that, at least for now, some of the worst prognostications of recession and stagnation have not materialized, at least for the time being. So, but some businesses, however, they do seem to appear to be somewhat disoriented and maybe losing sight of some of the basics and fundamentals of good business practice. So they may be overlooking many of the benefits that can be achieved by just looking at basic things. And some of those things might include items like planning, inventory management, leadership, training, customer care, cash flow management, and just pure simplification. And our panelists will tell us a bit more about these things as we get into the conversation. So, Lisa, what fundamentals of business are you seeing people overlook? What mistakes are they making, and what kind of benefits could they achieve from just getting back to basics?
Well, I am definitely seeing that they've lost sight of doing inventory management. It wasn't a priority when interest rates were low, and during the pandemic we couldn't seem to get enough product, so they weren't, they just were ordering everything they possibly could. But now, as interest rates have risen quite a lot, and sales are more volatile, they really have to start managing inventory. That does not necessarily mean that they need to reduce inventory, although reducing inventory will be helpful in terms of freeing up cash flow and avoiding taking out additional loans or lines of credit. But it really is about right-sizing the inventory and making sure you have what you need, where you need it, when you need it to grow the business, because I do believe there'll be more opportunities than ever before during this period of volatility. But you just don't want to have excess, which is tricky. So that leads me to sales, inventory, operations planning, which is another basic, which is, how do I really look at your demand planning? What am I going to be selling to? What are customers doing? How is their business changing? What products do they really need? Are they rationalizing? Looking at all of that and then saying, okay, how do I best fulfill this with the least cost, so that I don't have, I can be as profitable as I can be, and I can have as little inventory and cash tied up unnecessarily in my end-to-end supply chain. So I'm looking at least inventory and SIOP as two of the fundamentals, and then the third that I threw out there is really people need to utilize ERP systems and related technologies so that they can automate, digitize, be more efficient. There's plenty of opportunity. Every single client underutilizes their system, no matter how old, but they can always utilize their system more.
It's interesting that focusing on that basic of inventory management sparks things off in many directions, doesn't it? So you have a financial aspect to it, and with rising interest rates, that's ever more important. You have a supply chain aspect to it as to where your suppliers are. And you have a kind of a simplification aspect to it. You say, really, do I need all of these lines that I have, or can I simplify, or can I use common parts, or so on? So is that the kind of thing that you see as knock on from focusing on inventory management?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And you bring up an important point. Where is your inventory could also relate to where are you sourcing? Where's your manufacturing at? Is it where it really needs to be? There's a lot of risk in today's supply chain, especially if you have inventory being sourced from China, as an example. There's no way that we're going to reshore everything that's produced in China immediately, but we really need to start to produce priority critical items. So it's looking at all of those aspects that you mentioned, Patrick. We could probably talk about it for quite some time, but there's a lot of strategic elements to inventory as well as tactical.
Yeah. We'll maybe come back around for some kind of specifics, and we can delve in deeper. But I think it's a good point. I was actually talking to somebody today, and this maybe pertains to China, as you mentioned, the geopolitical tensions in that part of the world. So if Taiwan were to be, maybe not invaded, but we're just cut off for whatever reason, we're blockaded, there'd be, major repercussions. And we had an example of that. This conversation I had today was with something very mundane, which was a racking supplier. And one of the biggest steel mills in Europe was in Mariupol in Ukraine. And that place was flattened last year. And the steel supply just stopped. And that caused havoc both for prices and supply of steel throughout Europe, as is used in racking systems. So these things can happen, and they happen very quickly. And when they've happened, it's too late to do anything about it.
Absolutely true. It's as much as we don't want to deal with it, because it is going to add costs. But as much as we don't want to deal with it, if we don't deal with it proactively, we just, we're just not going to be able to deal with it at the last minute. So only the successful are going to figure this out ahead of time.
Yeah. And another point I'll pick on, because I don't want to be kind of all doom and gloom here, because I kind of introduced this with kind of all sorts of upheavals that have been going on for the last number of years. But you mentioned in your reply that you see opportunities. So why do you see opportunities, and where do you see opportunities? What's fueling your optimism?
No, actually, I do see more opportunities for like the proactive, smart clients. They have to be, it's not for the faint of hearts, but if the company is innovative, is thinking ahead, and is resilient, they're going to be looking at what's changing with their customer needs, and what are their ideal customers anyway, needing to sell, where are they going? So they're going to be, on top of what's most important to them. And then what I'm seeing is that what you just said about Ukraine shutting down steel production, well, those kinds of things are just going to be happening, because throughout the world, there's complications, there's weather, but there's certainly plenty of risk going on currently. So there's plenty of downside. So a lot of those disruptions will occur, and the weaker companies just, they're not going to have the steel. They're not going to be able to serve customers. They're going to struggle. They're going to decide, what, this isn't worth it. I'm going to, maybe I'll just be purchased by someone or go out of business or whatnot. But it's going to be leaving opportunities for those people who do have availability of the products that are needed. So you can't have everything because it won't be achievable. But if you know who your ideal customers are and you know where they're going and what they're going to need, and you're automating, digitizing, reducing costs and being resilient, you'll be able to grow when your competition struggles, because there's a lot of volatility ahead. So it's really more unknown what's going to happen, but for sure customers are going to struggle, and it's going to leave opportunities for those who are thinking ahead.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So, yeah, definitely. And so to you, Antonio, what are you seeing? So what kind of business fundamentals are you seeing people overlooking, and what kind of benefits do you think they could get from getting back to basics?
Well, every now and then, or I don't know, every 5 or 10 years, it seems that global economy needs reset, or where you go on factory settings, and then it's about fundamentals when this happens. And so we had this in 2008 financial crisis. Also, it was disrupted, and then we had it in 2020 in pandemic, this big reset. So that's when we speak about fundamentals. And what are the fundamentals for me? It's about 4 components that are generally important, and it's strategy, it's processes in a company, then competencies of the people, and organizational competencies, and then resources like Lisa mentioned, inventory, or some technology, or capacity. For example, in China we now have capacities, and when I spoke a few years ago with one of my acquaintance, and he said that capacities will be the next big competitive advantage, and China has a lot of it. So these are actually fundamentals, and when we go element by element, for example, a strategy. First, you need strategy, and what is fundamental elements of the strategy? It's always growth. So we want to grow because it fuels and gives us energy, and so. And then we have to be profitable. Growth without profitability is not very long term, but
especially now as well with rising interest rates.
Yes, so we grow financially, but it's not necessarily that we grow actually product wise or service wise. And but the third component or element is the most important, I think, and it's cash flow. So actually cash as a element of asset. So we have inventory on one side and cash on the other side, and these 2 components of the assets of the company are related, they are connected, and if you have, as Lisa mentioned, if you have too much inventory and you neglected to control it in a few years ago in pandemic, and especially in the year after the pandemic, when there was big bullwhip effects was growing, and there was all about the how to deliver, not that you have too much inventory, but you just wanted to buy wherever you can. So this and cash is actually the growth is very how to say, cash consuming. So if you want to grow, you need cash, and that's why I think this is very important, fundamental, that companies sometimes forget. And there is a saying that no company will go bankrupt if it is not profitable, at least not in a short term. But if you don't have cash, you will go bankrupt immediately when you don't have enough money to pay for your employees or to your suppliers. So this is one component, and then there are processes. For example, it is also fundamental element of of business. Processes had to be lean, and it was revolution in the 60s and 70s when Toyota introduced this lean movement, so to speak. And then we realized, okay, the process is consisted of I don't know, two main activities: those that add values and those that don't. and then we realized that we have to eliminate those that are actually waste. So this is actually fundamental. It's pure common sense. So you don't do things that are not adding value to your customers. So this is very important. And the other thing in connection with the processes is simplicity. So simplicity is actually, this is maybe a second name for lean. So you have to have simple processes, not very complex. And now we know in this supply chains that are global supply chains that are very, very broad and deep, and several layers and several tiers. So it needed to be simplified. They needed to be simplified or decomplexed, so to say. So
yeah, or shortened. Do you think maybe people were trying to combine lean supply chains with supply chains that were simply too complex, and they just, when there was a crisis, they just didn't really work very well?
Yes, because I think that when a lot of companies speak about lean, and they think they are lean, but they're actually not. Because if you divide the supply chain on elements and you make lean these elements, that doesn't mean that the whole supply chain is lean. So if you optimize some elements, you don't have optimized the whole. So that's why these supply chains collapsed in pandemic and in later year or years, because they were not lean. And we had a conversation on this panel, I don't know, 1 year or 2 years ago about lean, and then we said, actually it's not lean that is a problem, but people didn't actually introduce lean as it should they. And so I think this was the problem.
Yeah, I think the point is that lean is a kind of a systemic approach to process design, if you like, but oftentimes it's done in a kind of reductionist way, which is counterproductive and dysfunctional in many ways. So thanks for that, Antonio. We'll maybe come back and delve a bit deeper in a little while, but I'll go over to Elizabeth and put the same question to her in terms of what fundamentals of business are you seeing being overlooked, and what kind of benefits could people be getting from going back to basics?
Patrick, one of the things that I was listening to Lisa and to Antonio, and when we talk about all the processes and we talk about the inventory management and cash and our resources, at the end of the day, what's behind all of that are people. We're moving the cargo, and we're moving the components of our manufacturing supply chains, but there's people behind all of that. So I think that customer service connection, that human connection between our clients and our customers, our suppliers, our vendors, I think that is very key in order to win that business. So, one of the things that Lisa mentioned, I took a note. She said, what's changing with the customer's needs? And we need to be on top of what's important to them. Well, the best way to do that is to pick up the phone and call them. If we can, if it's possible to just pick that phone up and just call them. We can do some research, and you certainly want to keep up with what's going on with industry trends. But the best way to find out what's happening with your customers, with your clients, with your suppliers, is to call them and ask them. Schedule a little bit of that FaceTime. It doesn't have to be, a long conversation. It could be multiple shorter conversations, but just having that personal touch point where you have someone that you can pick up the phone and call. I know for all of us, when we have a problem and we get into a phone tree and we don't know who to call, it's very, very frustrating. When you have a person on the other end that that you can get a hold of at some point, you may have to leave a voicemail, you have to schedule some time, but that there's a person that you can talk to. I think that is, key to winning business. That human connection, but that's also a two-way street. It's not necessarily just you calling and making that conversation with them. I think that having them, being able to call you as well. So if you're a provider or a supplier, or if you call those customers, if you're a customer, call your supplier and ask them, what can I expect? What can you do to help me? These are my needs. Tell them what you need and give them an opportunity to provide you and win your service and win your business, and to have that priority status. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is about maximizing your business and your services across business lines with your both ways. Again, having that both ways. If you're a provider of services, call those customers and find out what other needs do they have, not just that one piece that you might be providing, especially with transportation providers. When you're looking at the shipping lines, they have a lot of different services that they offer. They can be full service. So if you need some more of those services, can you go to a one-stop shop and minimize all those different touch points that you have across your supply chain, that you can streamline and manage that more effectively with one service provider versus trying to manage multiple providers. As you mentioned, you're looking at geopolitical issues, and we're looking at disruption, having that flexibility to be able to look at how can I manage my processes more effectively, I think is going to be key. And that all comes down to customer service and finding that business, finding those people that you can connect with to help you manage that. Those people that understand your business and to be able to help you be able to grow that business. And like Lisa and Antonio both said, there's going to be winners, there's going to be struggles, and there's going to be opportunities. And use those opportunities to your best advantage by connecting with the people along the way that can help you.
It's interesting. It reminds me a little bit of this thing of having friends and keeping in touch with your family, that you've got to nurture the relationship. You've got to make an effort. And we have all of these tools. So we have telephones and we have WhatsApp and we have the ability to travel again. And I think a lot of us maybe got out of the hassle of travel, and maybe the little bit of anxiety maybe of being in the presence of somebody, and a lot of people who maybe were kind of, oh great, I don't have to do that anymore, and now they need to get out there again and do it. So, you know, getting on a plane and going to see a customer or a supplier, I think a lot of that maybe has been left by the wayside, and relationships are withering, and they need to be nurtured. The importance of that, I think, is very easily overlooked. And I've noticed myself that before, where nearly everything I did needed to be face to face, and then it went to zero during COVID for about a year and a half. And now that it's possible again, it has come back. And it doesn't need to be 100% again as it was before, because people are accustomed and comfortable using media like this here that we're using today. But it still makes a huge difference to go and see people, to press the flesh, to have a cup of coffee with them, to go to lunch with them, and still do business in that way. And it's maybe come back, in my experience at least, it's maybe come back to about 20-25% of what it was before, but it's much more value add than it was before, because before it was everything and it wasn't necessary, but now it's value add, and maybe some people are overlooking that. What do you think?
Absolutely. I could not agree more. You know, there's the old saying that people do business with people they know and people they trust. And there's only one way to build trust, and that is to have that face-to-face. That, like you said, Patrick, it doesn't necessarily have to always be in person, but having that face-to-face where you can actually see someone, not just a name that pops up on your phone or on your tablet, but actually have that interaction, that interpersonal communication is still key. And I could not agree more that getting out in person, even if it's once or twice a year in person, and then maintaining that via a FaceTime, a Zoom call, or some, you know, pick up the phone and a call to someone. But I think that getting that person-to-person connection is key to building trust in relationships.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
at the end of the day, you do business with people you know and trust.
Yeah, I think that needs to be structured and explicit, even though it doesn't feel like that when the contact is made. It feels more spontaneous. But behind the scenes, that really needs to be structured, I think, and it needs to be like an explicit requirement that people need to assume and take on to themselves. So
well, you're letting your clients, you're letting your customers know you are important to me and worth my time.
Yeah. And I think people appreciate it, even if it's just to say, listen, this is what's happening. Here are some new initiatives we're developing. People just like to be apprised of what's going on and know that you remember them. So yeah, I think it's very important. I'll go back around again. Maybe this is a double-barreled question. So I'll give you maybe the opportunity, say Lisa first. One, if you want to pick up on anything the other guys have said or I've said, and you want to add or elaborate on that. And then second, ask you, if I was to say to you, listen, one area of priority here, what would you do, or what would you recommend that people actually do right now in terms of getting back to basics? So double-barreled question for you.
Well, I mean, I completely agree on the customer service point of view. You know, the only way to stand out from the crowd is to be able to provide customer service. And we, just as a consumer, there's way too many just phones with no people at, you know, there to talk to, and it's just frustrating. I would definitely pay more to like get real help. It's just annoying. And so I definitely agree that I think that there's a, you know, a need for customer service and figuring out what's important in your industry. How are you going to do that?
Mhm.
And then the other, and I completely also agree with Antonio. Certainly lean is uncommon, common sense is the way I see it. But I do think that's, this another fundamental that has to be, thought through. And you brought up cash flow earlier today, Patrick, which relates a lot to inventory, but there's other strategies. Obviously, we also should be looking at ways to reduce cost throughout the system. But I would hesitate to reduce costs at the peril of customer service. So you have to be smart about how you're doing these things. There's ways, like you can look at your ERP and related technologies, because there might be plenty of ways where you can be more efficient without, while increasing your value to your customer, which is really what you want to do. And then I think you said, what was your second question?
But what would you specifically recommend that people do right now in terms of getting back to basics? So like we spoke in general, what's going on and what we're seeing, but if I said to you, listen, what would you recommend somebody actually do right now?
Well, I think that it's tricky because there are so few leaders out there. And so I think what Elizabeth said, first of all, about people is really quite important, is that if only, clients need more real leaders, so they have to develop leaders, but it's just not simple. And it doesn't, it's just not, you snap your fingers and suddenly you have people. I mean, you need to have leaders who can lead forward, because it's not a simple time frame with all the volatility, the disruption, the opportunities. But how do you manage all that without running out of cash? Or there's plenty of challenges along the way. So you really do need some leaders, and you need all your team moving in the same direction. So therefore, you need to engage people, figure out how to show the value of what they're doing so that they can feel a part of the future, which really goes back to leadership. So I think we should start developing leaders, and we also, they probably need to bring in more consultants as well that can help to fill some of these gaps while providing expertise to the people to move forward, so that they can supplement their ability to move forward quicker, because they really don't have a lot of time to get ready for these opportunities, if you will. And so I would suggest that they, focus more attention on who are their leaders, who are their key employees even, and what are they doing to make sure they retain them? How are they engaging them? Perhaps provide them with more resources. The clients that we work with, we provide some hands-on support while we're also providing some, path forward kind of help. And so we are able to fill a few of those gaps for our clients, and then they can take it from there. So, consider different ways, because if you don't have the people, it's not like you can just hire them and wait a year. It's just not going to be fast enough.
What do you what's your own read on why there's a dearth of leadership or leaders? What's causing that? Is it?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. One is that the baby boomers retired in droves during the pandemic. They said, okay, I've had enough of this. And, there wasn't really a transition.
Yeah,
there was no transition.
This is just a demographic aspect to it.
Well, there's definitely a demographic aspect.
Yeah.
And, that in some cases, they were certainly underappreciated because they had a lot of technical expertise that was undervalued. And they thought, oh, well, that person doesn't know the system or whatever they thought. And then they realized, oh, but they do know how to order all of our products. They know all of our specs. I mean, they had no idea. So, one is that the lack of people, for as far as people retiring, but then also people have been moving jobs and changing careers. So they're losing some key talent. The other thing that's happening here is that before the before the pandemic, I mean, we used to provide some training and development, and like Elizabeth and I are on the board of the Association of Supply Chain Management. We provide some training kind of support for these fundamental topics. However, there wasn't a significant priority, I would say, by businesses to invest in training because they had plenty of people. They had people with expertise. They were trying to say, they were thinking about cost, really. A lot of them, I mean, the smart ones, no, obviously, but you know, they were like, okay, where do I outsource this so that I pay the least price? Let's lean out the organization, you know, those kinds of things. They were providing some training, but that really wasn't a focus. So they didn't need to. But now, where are they going to get the people from? So like before, they could just recruit them. But recruit them from where? They're not there. They're not available. So it's really not the simplest matter anymore. You are going to just have to develop leaders. Unfortunately, there's not as many coming following the baby boomers, and so you're going to have to invest more time, energy, talent in this process. So it's
well, you know, what might be happening as well is the baby boomers move out, and a lot of those baby boomers, you know, in the UK would have gone to grammar school, and in the US they would have had maybe a more broad-based education, and while they had their speciality, they also had a perspective and a view on the bigger picture. And the way education has gone, you look at the degree prospectus of a university today, and there are hundreds and hundreds of degrees, but they're very, very specialized. So you got lots of people who know a lot, more and more about less and less. Yeah. And leaders are not really like that. Leaders are people who, you know, have a view and an opinion and see how things work, see how things go together. They're more kind of systems people. And maybe there's just a dearth of those coming through as well as the older ones move out. So maybe it's horrifying when we start to talk about that topic. You're right. There is issues with the education process as well. Yeah. So we may see, like, there is a phenomenon, and I've seen it in the media here in Ireland and also across the water in the UK, of people who did opt out. You know, people maybe only in their 50s who said, well, I've had enough, I'm out of here, I have enough, and so on. Yeah. And then with the cost of living crisis and so on, there's demand for them to come back, and a lot of them are coming back. And we're seeing retirement ages pushing upwards, and we see that even officially. You know, President Macron in France is fighting a battle to try to get the retirement age up from 62 to 64. But I think that's inevitable. People will be working longer, not just because they have to, but probably because they want to, and there's a demand for them. So that's an interesting, maybe an optimistic development for those of us of a certain vintage. So
yeah, I mean, I see some people who retired that are not coming back. They are like, I am done. I'm happy to be done. And then there's others that, you know, like you said, they may come back, but they might just come back to something else because they, you know, like they only need X amount of money. So, I mean, I think it's just going to be, it's going to be up to leaders to like engage people as well, which is tricky. So I agree. And unfortunately, I don't know, it's tricky because the younger generations see things differently. They are much more into like a work-life balance. You know, it's nothing wrong with it, but it's very different. So we're very used to, you know, being very efficient in a business sense. And that is not what you know, the people that we have today. Yeah. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And Antonio, if I was to say to you, what specifically would you be kind of recommending to people to focus on across that spectrum of things that you highlighted?
Well, I would, I'm referencing to your double barrel question. So first, I just want to emphasize what Lisa and Elizabeth was saying about people, and I just want to emphasize one more dimension of this okay, we have a lack of people. We have also lack of talents and so on. But another aspect is work environment in the companies. So this is what I am hearing from my clients and from some other people, that we heard about great resignation movement among young people, this Z generation and beyond. So and we also know that fundamental truth is that people don't go away from the company, but from the people, from the bosses, or from the bad relationships or bad environments in work environment in the company. And I just a few days ago I heard that some people went from one company to another on a smaller salary, just because of the very bad environment in work environment. So and I don't know, and this is fundamental, and we still, I mean, companies and these bosses and people and HR departments are making the same mistakes, fundamental mistakes. So now when there is so difficult to come to get some talents and some good people and any people, and then we don't recognize how important is that we retain them, in that we build or design an environment that is nice to work in and comfortable and so on. So I just wanted to say this as one fundamental that need to be expressed. So another thing that would I recommend as fundamental, and it is more maybe forgotten, and it's simplicity. So I mentioned it before, and we and you also, Patrick, said about these global supply chains that went so complex, and it's as we mentioned on the beginning, it's needed to reset sometimes. When we grow too complex, then we have to go and on the fundamentals. And fundamental is keep it simple. So when we speak about processes, about supply chains, about strategy, about people, leadership, and so on, it's always about simplicity. So I think that we need to go to some simple rules about, for example, we have to say there are simple rules that say, okay, you have to focus. You mentioned these companies that have thousands of SKUs of items, and they only I don't know, have one or two transactions.
That was the example I mentioned, where we had 12,000 SKUs in the SKU profile, and in 1 year there were hundreds and hundreds of those SKUs that only transacted once in the year.
Yeah. So this is big issue when we speak about inventory. Always when I optimize inventory in for my clients, this is first thing you have to optimize the portfolio. what items do you need and what you don't, and then it's always argument about why they don't need it, because they didn't sell anything in a year or two, but they say sales, for example, no, we need it, maybe we'll sell it this year or next, and so on. So you have to be focused, you have to simplify things. And there is a few of my clients mentioned this year that they have projects called decomplexity. So it's recognized, and all these things that we mentioned here are part of these projects. So how are they going? I don't know, but it is recognized that that simplicity is needed, and that we need to reset to factory settings, so to speak.
Thanks, Antonio. And Elizabeth, to you then, the same, if you will want to pick up on anything anybody else has said, and then what would you recommend people to focus on specifically?
Well, I certainly think that there is a big reset going on, the Great Reset. So I agree with Antonio on that one. And Lisa's comments about the new work-life balance. Could not agree with that more. I'm experiencing it myself, doing a little work-life balance of my own, but also, you know, with people that I work with and with the with other generations. But I think that as those generations, as they mature and as they get more experience in the workforce, I can't help but think that later on they're going to understand that there has to be certain levels of work commitment. You can't always stop at the end of the day at 3 o'clock just because it's, you know, you want to. I mean, there has to be, sometimes clients and sometimes situations are that you have to continue to give that customer service, because retention of our existing clients and existing customers is much easier and much more cost effective than going out and getting new ones. The cost of losing those customers and then getting new customers, it's very expensive. So I think retaining those customers, and that's providing that customer service. So the first thing that I would recommend is having those strategic plans. And I know we've talked about strategy and how important strategy is, but I think that going through your services, what do you provide, looking at your strategic plan and evaluating what do you offer, what differentiates your company from others, you know, in your field, and what can you provide? Where can you diversify your offerings that you can provide additional services to your customers? And then the second thing is you rank your customers. Go and look at your customer list. Who are your top customers? You know, depending on how many you have, who are your top 10, your top 20, and then rank them. And those top customers, those would be the first ones that I would call and set an appointment with. If I could take them to lunch, take them to coffee, stop by their office, bring them, you know, something to show my level of appreciations to retain that customer in my portfolio. And then also finding a way that you could expand their services. If they're only using 1 or 2 of your services and you offer 5 or 6 or 10, how can you get them to be more invested in other services that you provide? After you know who your top customers are, who are your bottom customers? Patrick said there were, those SKUs that only had 1 interaction per year. Why is that? Can you reach out to them and find out what you can do to get them more interactions per year? And then all those in the middle that they may not be your top customers, but they're interacting with you more than once a year. You want to make sure that you retain them as well, but also expand their services within your company as well. There's always more that you can do. There's always more that we can reach out. There's always, but it does take time. You have to make that time commitment and you have to make that dedication. And, you know, how can you provide those additional value-added services?
Yeah, there's between what you said and what Antonio said, it reminded me of a conference I attended last year in Amsterdam with the Australian supply chain guru, John Gatorna. And he was talking about both simplification and starting with your customers. And this idea of some businesses are trying to be all things to all people, all customers. And to do that, they have to have almost infinite supply chain configurations. And he has developed a number of supply chain archetypes. And he reckons that you can only really deliver maybe 2 or 3 effectively. So he's kind of saying, you got to select and simplify to these archetypes, whichever ones suit your customer profile. And you've got to start with your customers and configure on that basis, and then run that right through the business back through what you do and back out to suppliers. And it kind of picks up on what both of you guys have been saying there. So we're coming to the end. We're soon going to run out of road here on the clock. So maybe just to finish, I'll give you one kind of last short comment each, and I'll go back to Lisa for a parting word.
Well, I think it's you go back to people, processes, and technologies is really where you focus your efforts.
Antonio.
I would go with the simplicity, focus, and the complexity as a goal.
And then Elizabeth.
Provide the best customer service you can to those top, at least the minimum of those top customers.
Excellent. So thanks then to Lisa, to Antonio, and to Elizabeth, and thanks to everybody for being here and viewing us today, and look forward to being back here perhaps within another month or so with another panel discussion with my colleagues from the Supply Chain Special Interest Group at the SAC. So thanks again. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All done.